My panelists today are Samir Akshrekar, whom we know pretty well for the past 2 days. He's been there, and Commander Prakash. Definitely, he's been there, and some wonderful exchanges we have had. And Rinka is going to join very soon, and we're going to be talking about the cybersecurity landscape in India and how we can strengthen that. So, I will add a couple of points of my own, but before that, let me formally introduce Samir. We have heard about Commander Prakash earlier, so I will skip that at this point in time. Samir has been a good colleague of mine, not only in Cyberways but also from before. A multidisciplinary entrepreneur, okay, a blue-blooded cybersecurity person. He's been working to bring the cybersecurity sensitiveness to businesses, trying to secure businesses and individuals through various areas of sensitizing, training, remediation, and those kind of areas. A singular aim after he quit JP Morgan Chase and started as a co-founder Cyberways was to look at simplifying cybersecurity for businesses, which is a very big statement, if I may say that, in terms of looking at the challenges we have been facing in the past few months, trying to convince businesses that you're still in danger, you can be hacked if you're not yet been hacked. And for the last 2 decades, Samir has been holding leadership positions primarily in the technology area and specifically focusing on cybersecurity in companies like IBM and JP Morgan Chase, where we were colleagues for a pretty long time. Samir has implemented a risk-based approach. We have to look at a risk-based approach in the sense like at every point in time, and this was actually pretty well said by Diwakar yesterday also when we spoke about it. It is risk from technology, risk from processes, risk from finances, and risk from other actors who are there who are going to be impeding the process of business. And he's also talking about his capabilities which come forth not only from cybersecurity, but interdisciplinary technologies, where he has used that to actually drive an innovation model and also tries to reduce complexity in how we adopt technology and make it useful for our business. Okay, so in the interest of time, Rinka has about 3.5 years, 35 years of experience as a technologist and as a serial entrepreneur. He's been working in various capacities in both large and medium-sized companies like Novel, IBM, and also includes small startups. He currently leads an early-stage startup in the heterogeneous computing space. Apart from this, Rinka is also a contributor at iSpirit and leads the cybersecurity effort here. So I hope Rinka has joined now. Okay, so we have an hour between us, and what I will do is I'll quickly set the tone and pace for this, and then if the panel members have got a slide to present, I would request them to present that. Otherwise, I have a few questions I could ask, leading them to talk about the various areas they talk about. We spoke about national security yesterday, and when Lieutenant General Pant was here, he actually spoke about 2013 when the national security policy was drafted, and after that a plethora of bodies were created, and then we are on a journey today to stabilize and make it a much more robust security policy at a national level, and therefore it becomes important not only for at a nation, for the defense forces, also for the businesses and also for the individuals. Challenges, there are plenty of challenges. When you talk about it, India is the third largest country today where we have a number of users on the internet. And when you talk about internet, we have a number of endpoints where internet can be, there can be entry and exit from the internet. That's one of the areas. Then to add to that, we have got the moment you have something we feel is secure, you have non-state actors, you have individuals, you have nations which are capable of creating some kind of a war, either in the form of a simple thing, which is going to be like, we can term it as cyberbullying or those kind of threats, phishing, malware, virus, and things like that, but also to a full-fledged warfare. If you look at the progress that was made, in the late 70s, we had the viruses, and then towards the early 2000, we are talking about hacking of websites, we are talking about malicious codes, we talked about worms, we talk about in 2010, 2015, we are talking about PII theft in a big way, and then phishing, which was done. Then we also experienced the DDoS, and then today we are talking about cyber warfare. It's national security and threat, as somebody also mentioned during the opening remarks. Also in the two sessions we are talking about today, if you want to win a war against a country, you don't have to have a huge army. You need to have somebody who can asymmetrically work and destroy the entire economic framework, or get into the healthcare systems and steal all your PII and create the kind of a situation where you will be forced to surrender to this. Keeping these in mind, when you talk about digitization, digitization is you can talk about digitization being given wings, either in the form of sometime back we had demonetization and therefore we had to look at it, or a COVID-19, which is more recently, and therefore we had to move to adopt digitization much faster at different areas. And what we can see today is playing out in the academia and so on. Without security, this is absolutely going to be futile, because you're going to have more and more of such breaches, and we are going to be spending time to find out what, when, where, how, and then not going to be focusing on other areas. But refreshingly, when Lieutenant General Rajesh Pant told us that we are looking at certain things and that we would like to bring in the discussions around the journey of the policy that is being formed at a national level, it was a welcome sight. With that said, what I would do is I would turn it to Commander Prakash to have him speak on what he has planned to deliver today on this topic. Over to you, Commander Prakash.
Thank you. As in my morning session, I'll share a very brief snapshot of thoughts, more to provoke the discussion rather than as a presentation. Just give me a moment.
Sure, sir.
Okay, I hope this is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, as told, we are discussing securing the Indian cybersecurity landscape. I'm aware this August audience has got a lot of very eminent thinkers and educated people. For myself, I start at, what is the starting premise? And I find this very difficult to answer. What is Indian? What is security? You're saying secure Indian cyberspace landscape. What do you mean by Indian and what is security? I asked a cross section of people. These are answers I've got from people equivalent to 2 stars in the forces or additional secretaries and pretty senior people. The answer, of course, there is WhatsApp university level of polling, so I'll not strictly hold it against them, but it's indicative of a mindset. They say it should operate in India, employ Indian people, it should pay Indian taxes, it should have some legal standing in India, and it should help Indian people. Is this enough? Does this mean it's an Indian company, an Indian entity? Because I am staggered by this set of answers. Let us examine, for example, Cisco. It operates in India. It employs Indian people. It pays Indian taxes. Obviously, it's registered in India for business. And Cisco is now, for example, collaborating with our CERT India for cyberspace security of India. Are we comfortable with this definition? Do we now take it that Cisco is an Indian entity? I really wouldn't. It deeply disturbs me that we can have such a shallow definition. Let's take the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It operates in India. It employs Indian people, pays taxes. It is registered as an NGO. And let me tell you, in sheer social impact, it has far more positive effect on the Indian people than the CSRs of 24 Indian companies put together. But would we then consider the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as an Indian entity? What I would say an Indian entity is, firstly, it should be there in the Indian domain. Those of you who deal with networks or with corporate enterprises and all are familiar with the concept of a domain. A domain is just your sphere of control, where you enforce policy. You have a Microsoft Active Directory domain, you enforce who speaks to whom, password policy, this, that, everything, authentication. That is your domain. A domain is just your sphere of control. Do either Cisco or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation fall in your sphere of control? No. And the second is, are they stakeholders in an Indian polity? A polity is a group of like-minded people who are interested in each other's welfare. They may not necessarily agree with each other. I may like X political party, you like Y political party. As long as we are convinced that we both stand for progress of this particular set of people whom we have a concept called the Indian nation, we can say that yes, we both potentially are Indian entities. Would either Cisco or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation subscribe to this? So I have a feeling we are not even able to define what is an Indian entity. Second is, what is security? What is security of data? I had a very embarrassing experience right after the demonetization. I was speaking in Bombay in a security conference in a college in Bombay. And there was a gentleman from a very large public sector bank who went on and on about how our accounts are having X levels of encryption, and they are there in secure data centers, etc., etc. One college guy got up and showed him. He said, sir, I sort of trawl around in the deep web immediately after demonetization. He said, sir, aapke paas kitne account hai? That guy said something like 60 lakh accounts. He said, how many of them have got 30,000 crore in like an Ambani account or something? So the bank guy laughed and said, accounts don't work that way actually. वो पिक्चरों में होता है. He said precisely. तो आपके जो 7 layers of encryption वगैरह हैं, who's bothered? He showed a screenshot from dark web. For DDoS attacks in India, somebody, presumably one of our friendly neighbors, was offering X dollars per hour for so many Gbps of traffic. He said, I'll earn money not by breaking your bank's encryption. I am earning money by denial of service. So your data security may not mean what you think it means, because the availability is not there. Similarly, network, applications. There are so many entities now offering free healthcare services, electronic health record services to hospitals, free video conferencing, free telemedicine, and they are sucking in data. Would you call these applications secure? The fact is that there is a context to security. What the data is about, who the owner is about, that is a context. Second thing is assurance. In business, you look at security. Okay? Like, I need to be sure that my data is XYZ, due diligence, etc. When it comes to strategic sectors, critical infrastructure, you need to look at assurance. Let me look at it this way. I am running a payment gateway. PCI DSS declares me competent enough to run a payment gateway. It's a business context, right? Why is it secure? Because LR Prakash comes and says this room is logged, and LR Prakash has a string of qualifications, CISSP, ethical hacker, penetration tester, etc. after my name. So you say, okay, LR Prakash has said that this room is secure. But that is security. Assurance is when LR Prakash says, I built this room. I know there is no window on the other side. I know every brick that went into this. They may not be my bricks, but I have checked every brick that went into this. That is assurance. Sometimes LR Prakash may say, I don't know every brick that went into this, but I have mitigated for those risks. That is assurance. And when it comes to critical sectors, security doesn't cut it. You need assurance, right? Security, for example, says that if the damage to the bank is going to cost 10 lakhs, I'm ready to spend 9,99,000 on security, on keeping away LR Prakash. Assurance is this critical infrastructure. There is no direct cost to it. There's only criticality associated with it, and therefore I need assurance. And finally, timelines. I need something today. Whereas IIT Delhi is developing a special crypto mechanism for me, which hopefully will come and get produced by BEL in 4 years. Sorry, my banking has to go on today. Therefore, the security level which I'm looking at is different from something which a nuclear agency is looking at. Short term, medium term, long term. They need not necessarily be, conflicting with each other. Which brings us to strategy versus operations. What you are thinking of in the long term versus what you need to do today. You have the clarity of thought, then you can decide, do I buy this, do I build this? Then you can decide what government should do and what industry should do. For example, these are two of the biggest continuing comedy shows going on today. Government doing business and corporate saying we self-regulate. For example, our media channels right now. The government cannot do business. Business is about risk. The government cannot take risk sensibly. And every time the government steps into business, it is inefficient. At the same time, we are expecting some corporate to do Desh Ki Seva. You're expecting him to self-regulate. I tell you very clearly, if I am invested in ABC's company and ABC tells me, I'm doing this for my own regulation and governance, Facebook says we are regulating hate speech. You really think Facebook's investors will allow that? They'll have Mark Zuckerberg out of that seat before you can blink. Because the idea is very clear. Boss, I invested in you, you get me money. Be legally compliant, but that's about it. I do not really want you. They can keep saying it for publicity or whatever. But no corporation is here to regulate itself or to serve national interests. A corporation is there to make money. A government is not supposed to be there to make money. It's supposed to regulate the corporation. We seem to have no clarity over this, which is why we are in the current state. And what is our current state? Before I come to this, probably didn't gather my thoughts well enough. Let us see who is looking at our solutions. These are excerpts from two reports of our foremost strategic agency, Niti Aayog. The first is our National Artificial Intelligence Roadmap. And the second is the most ambitious support services program for all states for implementing e-governance. Do we see a problem in this? Evidently, at least legally, there is no problem. Niti Aayog says that, I showed you the opinions earlier. Organizations having distinct legal status, they may have global lineage, they can have foreign brand name. I really don't see why it should matter. This is a reply given by the Honorable Minister to Parliament. So it is not some junior functionary talking. This is at the highest levels of government. This is our stated policy to the representatives of the people in Parliament. So which is why I come back to my starting premise. this is a famous quote from a book that influenced me a lot when I read it as a relatively young guy. Do we need somebody else to tell us what is good and what is bad? Do we need McKinsey to tell us what we should do in AI? Accenture. Coming back to our starting premises, what is Indian? This is what the ministry says, that this is good enough to advise India on strategy. But the problem is big tech is not Indian. Consultants gravitate to big tech. Oracle is now leading our aspirational district strategy. Obviously, because you had Ernst & Young as your consultant for it. IBM, Microsoft, Google, Adobe. IBM says I'm doing, I think, healthcare. Google is doing agriculture. Microsoft is doing education strategy with Niti Aayog. Adobe says, I think, AI or something. They are all now our partners for strategy. Are they Indian? And if they are, then what is our security? I said in the morning that why do we keep saying China? Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Xiaomi is as much a preference of mine as Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. If I have to be subject to the Patriot Act, I might as well be subject to the Politburo. Why do we have this, preference to being a slave to X and not Y? If we are sure that we are going to be slaves, let's have our cheaper options here. Just because they are maybe more polished in manipulating public perception because of the reach of Facebook and Apple, etc., it doesn't mean they are necessarily better choices for us. So this is what I wanted to bring forward rather than
Commander, can you wrap up, please, the last 2 minutes?
Yeah, that MSMEs, SMEs, startups are the key. Your consultants will always push you towards big tech, but look at Germany, built by hundreds of MSMEs rather than few giants. That is what is the key. Don't try to build up whales, try to build up schools of piranha. Small, sharp, ferocious, ruthlessly competitive. And we'll bring down the whales, not to worry. Look at the MSMEs and the SMEs. Bite the bullet. If it's not optimal in the starting, it's okay. It is still homegrown. If they are conflicting views, resolve them to have a single vision. Empower industry, regulate it. And finally, one request to the industry, don't sell out for funding. We have examples of very good Indian industries who have sold out. Couldn't help it. It was their business view. Just survive. I strongly am an optimist. I believe times will change. Viewpoints will change. Just survive till then. And finally, before leaving, some thoughts beyond my pay grade. These are all very famous brand names: MongoDB, Anaconda Big Data, Palantir Analytics, Keyhole, which is Google Earth, Databricks, GitLab. What is common to all of them is that an US government strategic agency invested in them when they were startups. Obviously, it had a slew of investments. Some worked, some didn't work. But it didn't enter the investment space for money. It entered it for national security. And this, I believe, is what will secure our cyber landscape. The industry will take care of itself. As long as you have the government doing the strategic investment, the industry will take care of itself. As I said, I am relatively an optimist. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Prakash. I will leave one comment here, and probably we can, at the end of the session, we can come back and look at it. Having been in the industry for over 3 decades now, and mostly American companies, HP and IBM and JP Morgan. And yes, I also worked in an Indian company and so on. I look at it from the point of view of services and products, and they are all here for business. Today, if you look at the services, the multinationals don't waste any time in hiring the best talent or the people who they feel are best talent and then start putting them on areas. But your point of saying that there are certain areas which we should farm, the Indian government should farm with the bodies that they have around them to, for example, national security, and build our own cases over there and success stories which can compete with others for jostle for space right now, but compete with others typically thinking in a longer scale in terms of bringing solutions at a national level. Thank you again. So let me turn to my good friend Samir. Your time, you have 15 minutes. You can put your slide if you have. Thank you.
Sure, Suresh. So I have one slide which I intend to talk through, and then open to questions from you. I know you have curated a fair bit of questions. So this is on India's cybersecurity strategy. And this is sort of my wish list that I'm putting up here in terms of what do I expect from an India cybersecurity strategy. And obviously General Pant spoke towards it, so hopefully most of this will come true. So looking forward to that. So in the meantime, here I go. So to start with, firstly, looking for a whole of government approach. When I think about cybersecurity strategy, when I think at it from a national perspective, correct? It spans multiple sectors, multiple critical information or infrastructure sectors. So we need the government to come in to sort of establish the guardrails. Correct? So the government has to really establish the guardrails of this is how cybersecurity will function in the country. Correct? So once those boundaries are set, once those guardrails are set, then rest of the private and public sector enterprises and startups and fintechs can flourish or operate as they want, but in those guardrails. So what does this mean? So when I say whole of the government approach, one is talent. You need the right people. Cybersecurity is a multidisciplinary domain, as we've seen across these 2 days. Correct? It's not just technical. It covers so many areas. So you need the right people in the right places across the government, across the center and all of the central ministries. You need people, the right people across the state, right? Starting with just the government. So you need the right people, and they need to have the right R&R in place. What are their roles and responsibilities need to be very clearly detailed out. Right? So people and their R&R needs to be in place. You can't have generalists in these roles. No, these are specific roles. They need, as I say, you need economic intelligence teams to do KYC. You know how economic frauds are happening, and tie them back to cyber aspects or intelligence aspects. So you need the right people, and they need to have the right R&R in place. Then you need to have the right oversight and governance in place. Correct? India is a massive country, massive amount of sectors, industries, people. So you need to have the right oversight and governance in place at the central level from a country perspective. What is your oversight and governance on cybersecurity? What are you really watching for when you look at the whole country landscape? Okay. Who are the implementation agencies? Because the devil is in the detail. If you don't get your details right, there's no point having budgetary, there's no point having all of the good things if you're not going to get the implementation right, because they say you'll get hacked. And there you go, you've got hacked. So implementation agencies. And then the coordination across the states and the agencies. So the oversight and governance, implementation, and the coordination across the states and the agencies are vital. Correct? When we speak about a cybersecurity strategy, you need these three in place to happen. As you said, a question of yours is across the states. Yes, because the states, if you talk about the police cells, the police cyber cells or the police IT cells, they are not going to define the standards. The standards will come from the top. They are the executors and the enforcers of these standards. Correct? If I log a call saying I got a phishing attack, they should have a defined process of how do I investigate, what are the tools. They should not have to go and buy tools or buy platform. They should have an established platform put in place centrally, top of the house, saying use this process and methodology for investigating these incidents, leverage these treaties, leverage these memorandums of understanding that we have with all of these countries to get the data, because most of the time these attacks are from outside. They're not from, maybe sometimes occasionally within the country, but predominantly outside. So they need to be enabled. So they can't be left to figure out everything on their own. But that coordination, the regular dialogue needs to happen. So that's why I said whole of the government approach. As Mr. Pant said, budgetary allocation is a best practice, needs to be in place. But budgetary allocation, obviously for the government requirements, but also to drive private sector engagement. As Mr. Prakash said, we need to invest in the right startups, the right system, the right companies, so that we don't sell out. Correct? These companies need to know that they have the complete backing of the government, and the government has put a pool of money together saying this is the pool of money and we will invest. Again, you need the right people to make these decisions, to have the vision, to see what type of technology is useful, which type of startup is the right one that we want to invest our dollars in or rupees in. So that needs the right people, but then you need the money as well. So budgetary allocations both for the government as well as for private sector engagement. The legislative framework for enforcement, absolutely. You need to bring the bad actors to penalize them. But then we need to be careful here that it should not become a compliance tick the box exercise. I've seen across the region, being part of JP Morgan, that you have regulators who are highly prescriptive. And that's what they get in terms of solutioning. They don't get growth in their countries. You need a high level principle based approach for guiding the private players. Correct? And you have those guardrails. Those guardrails are your enforcement. But within that, give them the freedom to operate. Correct? So your legislative framework for enforcement should be very much principle based, and try and keep it light, and again a risk based approach, saying these are your critical infrastructure companies, we will get audited, they will get assessed. The rest who are not critical from an infrastructure perspective, I don't want to overburden them with compliance. Correct? So we let them operate and let them do their business, generate jobs, generate money. That's what the economy needs. So you have to have a balance there. And then you need to come to a proactive role. The cybersecurity strategy needs to be proactive. Why? And how is you need to establish centers of excellence across sectors, across states. Why? To drive awareness. To drive awareness within the sectors, to drive awareness within the country, and to drive research. That's your bread and butter of center of excellence. Drive awareness. Awareness can be obviously mass outreach as well as establishing the right curriculum. So these COEs can partner with the National Skills Council, the various HRD ministries, center and states to establish and drive that curriculum. And then obviously research, so that the right problem areas are researched. So these COEs can then take in demand from private companies, can take in demand from obviously government, and various other international as well. If you are a COE of that repute, then you can get a lot of business and solutioning and think tank developed within that environment. So COE is absolutely essential to be proactive. Contribute globally towards standards. Why shouldn't India propose a cybersecurity framework? Why can't we propose? We have the talent, and the talent was visible here today. So why can't we propose the cybersecurity framework? Because, correct? Why can't we? And then use the COE again. You've established COEs, they drive and propose the framework, and then you participate in conferences. You host international conferences, and that's where the budgetary allocation comes in. That's where the private sector engagement comes in. You host these conferences, host the internet conference, host the IP conference, host the DEF CON, an Indian version of it, start with it. So that's how you can participate and be proactive globally. And then use the COEs again to provide implementation standards for private, for public, for NGO, for startups, whoever it is. And your implementation standards can be hardware based, open source software based, correct? And we've got a lot of catching up to do in terms of if we're trying to develop a microchip on our own, or an operating system on our own, we've got a long way to catch up. So it can't happen day one. So in that interim, you have to have standards in place, saying whoever are these foreign players, whether it is Cisco, whether it is IBM, whether it is Microsoft, they operate in these guardrails. They operate within this defined environment, and you drive the implementation of standards from an India perspective. So these are the 4 pillars that I see from an India cybersecurity strategy perspective, and I hope a lot of these will come true with as General Pant has given heads up. So very much looking forward to this, and I hope this materializes. I'll continue to publish and write about this online. So that's it, and open to questions, Suresh.
Thanks, Samir. That was neatly done. I think the way you've been working, I have seen you working in my previous engagement, but it's neatly done, stuck to the script. The point which I had raised with Commander Prakash, we will discuss that towards the end, but definitely when we look at areas of improvement, we spoke about a national level, we spoke about a state level, and yes, we can talk about the areas of where we can, with the talent that we have today, and we saw yesterday, and there must be much more, 10 times more or 100 times more. How do we actually look at proposing a framework to the government? Today we know, while we can sit and talk about the government's lack of, or the government's lethargy in whatever form, their limited knowledge and capability, if you're going to, look at empowering them, how can we as a team empower them? So Samir, between yourself, Ms. Heblikar, me and Munjal, we have spoken to a few companies, especially in the healthcare. So we need to look at what is it that we can do to shake them out of that area, and to look at implementing and, and the government coming out with guardrails. So we'll save it for the end where we can talk about it. Now, I will quickly bring in Rinka. Can you go ahead and put up your slide, please?
Hi, everyone. Yeah. Hi, everyone. No, I don't have a slide. I will talk about some of the things. Very fascinating inputs from Commander Prakash and Samir. Let me talk a little bit about iSpirit, who we are, and what we are doing in this space. iSpirit is a think and do tank, if you will, that focuses on Indian startups. And one of our key focus is on helping the government to move from where it is to where it should be. And as part of that, there's a lot of work that we've done. I'm sure you're familiar with the UPI or India Stack, which is part of, which is your Paytm, Google Pay, etc. That work came out of iSpirit. We're currently working on things like the health stack, which will go as part of Ayushman Bharat. Within iSpirit, I lead the cybersecurity effort. So to talk a little bit about the cybersecurity effort, and that aligns with a lot of the points that Commander Prakash and Samir have made. What we're looking at doing is come up with a platform, if you will, that will allow assessment of a company and assign a quote-unquote security score, a cybersecurity score to them. Based on that assessment. I won't go into the details, but the goal here is, if you have the intention here is that it can be any company starting from a small Kiryana ka dukan going all the way up to the armed forces. So, and it will be largely automated. So intention is you run this within your system and you get a score saying that this is your level of capability. Why a score? Because it becomes very easy to then look at, a comparative this thing, in the sense you can say, okay, now I have a score of 70 and I am certainly better than somebody who has a score of 30. Now this is intended to be from an ecosystem perspective. So let's say a DRDO score is also dependent on the score that maybe a Bharat Forge would get, and in turn would be dependent on the score of all the ancillaries that Bharat Forge works with, including the small guy who provides banner services and the small services. So all that comes together. The reason why this ecosystem score is important is because when an attack comes, it is not a direct attack that is usually successful, but it is an indirect attack. So for example, there was recently an attack on Lockheed Martin. How that attack succeeded was Lockheed Martin employees would go to the Starbucks that is right next to the Lockheed Martin plant and have coffee there and surf the internet there. And that was used as a gateway to get into the LM employees' machines, and from there into LM. So it is not that Lockheed Martin alone needs to be protected, but the entire ecosystem needs to be protected. And so we want to look at it from that perspective. The other point that Samir made, and we are looking at, and we are very clear we want to make happen, is we want to make this into a standard so that we take over from where the standards have stopped today, the various ISO standards, etc., and come up with our own standard, which is implemented, automated, so that implementation of the standard now becomes dead simple for anybody. And we hope we get to this point where this standard now becomes global. As part of this, one of the efforts that is happening within iSpirit that we plan to leverage is there's this initiative about software being India's soft power. And we plan to leverage that to go out global. So having said that, I think there are one or two points I want to make about what Commander Prakash said and what Samir said. I completely agree with what they said. The first thing is about strategic thinking. We need to be very clear strategically what is it that we will own, what is our definitions, and what is it that is not so important and we can subcontract. So for example, we are not going to say that we can subcontract the armed forces functionality, but we don't mind subcontracting, getting a local security guard at a colony. So there is, it's a continuous spectrum, and we need to define what is it that is important to us. What Commander Prakash has defined as sphere of control, a sphere of influence, and related to that is, there will be information, technologies, capabilities available outside. So what is it that we can collaborate, and what is it that we must own ourselves? If you go to an American company, so I've been part of the whole outsourcing and working with global companies. American companies, for example, are very clear that it doesn't matter what it costs us. This is what we will develop and own in-house. This is strategic to us. And this is what we can outsource. With that, it is with that definition they go out and outsource. We do not have any such definition, and that kind of comes out with that Niti Aayog document that Commander Prakash showed. And these are things that we must be clear within ourselves first. So that is the first point I want to make. The second point is Commander Prakash alluded to QTIL, which is the CIA's funding arm that looks at funding various companies that are strategic to them. That is exactly what China is doing in Huawei and the other companies. They are also, the Chinese intelligence or the PRC armed forces arm is funding these guys. We know that, right? So why is it that we cannot do something like this? See, when we talk about why companies go out from a funding perspective, while I agree with Commander Prakash that we need to be optimistic, but from a company perspective, let's realize that we are short of everything. We're short of cash, we're short of talent, we're short of everything. And it is by getting this funding that we are able to go out, scale up. Because finally, as a business, our job is to succeed, right? Create wealth for ourselves as well as our investors, right? And satisfy a need in the market. Unfortunately, we have nothing that will help us to stay within India and do this within India. So one of the sad facts today is that 97% of almost all startups that are actually incorporated outside India, and in some ways are more than willing to go out. We don't have a choice. While emotionally we might want to stay, but then practicality dictates something else. These are some of the things that need to be addressed actually. So I'm open to questions, thoughts.
Yeah, Rinka, thank you. It kind of, it kind of provoked some thoughts in me when we were talking about it. And this kind of ties in very well with what Samir spoke and Commander Prakash spoke. So when you talk about investment today, iSpirit is one area, and I'm glad to know that, there's so much you're doing, and we have connected some time back on that. But when you look at investment for something like cybersecurity or national security, we have to have deep pockets. We'll have to have a lot of funds. We'll have to look at it has to be at the par of global investment. When you take any country like any European country or America, for example, the way they would invest for a cost like that would be 100, 200 times more than what India can do. Now, I'm not saying that India cannot do, but there's a lethargy as to why do you want to do that. Now, investment is not the only one. We are talking about other resources. So one of the things which all of us as technical people, we have staffed our projects, and we know how difficult it is to get people. Okay. Now, is there a push or a pull? When you talk about the Indian companies, whether it is Infosys or it is Wipro, compared to an IBM or a JP Morgan or a Citibank, why do people prefer to go there? We have to understand what is driving them. I worked in Wipro for 8 years, and I could see one comment over there saying that Wipro had its own operating system, WDOS. I worked on it for many years, and I enjoyed working on it. It was Sentinel, which was bought over. And now the thing is, somewhere in between, when you look at the growth of IT, security was not something which was thought of very, very clearly at that point in time. It was not on our radar at any point of time, whether it's an Indian company or a multinational company. It was ease of use. To draw a very simple example is, if I have to go to a bank and withdraw money, I stand in a line, I have a withdrawal slip or a check, I carry my passbook, he gives me a token, the teller gives me a token, I wait for my number to be called, and then while it's happening, I'm talking about how much kitna time lag raha hai. Now, to make it easy for us, we went to patient and we made the teller's life easy, or he felt threatened that his job is going to go, So it was difficult for him to get trained on those simple IT solutions. And I know I spent a decade trying to train people on those areas. Today, we are talking about an ATM where technology has grown by leaps and bounds. Now, what has happened is the private sector largely has a clear roadmaps of growth. And again, bringing back to the point what Commander Prakash mentioned is, you see a lot of IBMs over here. They've got 20 facilities in Bangalore, maybe another 10 facilities in Bombay, and I don't know how many more and things like that. Citibank has got it, Accenture has got it, Microsoft has got it, and things like that. My point is, where is the place for Indian companies to grow? Number one, from the point of view of creating something at par globally, either products or services and things like that. So if any one of you gentlemen want to take up that, or if each one of you have got a perspective, we can talk about that. Because if you're talking about a think tank, yes, we have all the capability, but putting the think tank together and then servicing the need at this time of national security is paramount for us. I'll stop there. Who wants to go first?
So, Suresh, sorry, I missed it. You're saying is how can we at a think tank level take this and address some of the national security questions?
Yes. And be a support to the government. The government can lean on and say that, today we are talking about, yes, the government has to regulate. Yes, the government should not be in business. Yes, this has to be done, and so on and so on and so on. We also agree that we have the wherewithal, we have the capability, technology, technical strength, and so on. But how do we put all these things together to become a solution at a national level for cybersecurity, national security? Samir.
Well, I think as Rinka said, there is already work being done by iSpirit to an extent in that direction. I think just in the interest of this domain, various think tanks need to come together, correct, to tackle this problem. Cybersecurity is not an easy problem to tackle because globally we have trillions of dollars being invested in cybersecurity, and the damages are also in trillions of dollars. So something is inherently wrong here. So it is. I would be foolish to say that we can try and fix it. So we need as many qualified heads here to come together, put the thought process together, and then work collectively. I think one think tank trying to influence, nothing against particular think tank, but I think holistically the power of a larger collective thought process can work to influence the government machinery here and propose, saying these number of think tanks and people holistically support this particular framework. It is in the India's best interest to take it forward and drive the implementation. And this framework has the skills matrix, it has the investment thought process, it spans across various sectors like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Bitcoin, etc., etc. So when you show them all of these aspects and how it cuts across and the benefits that India will get, I think the government would be reciprocative to and then establish a formal line of engagement, maybe a super.
So Samir, let me just add one more facet to that, and I would leave it to both Rinka and Commander Prakash also join in. Let's say that the government of India today says that we constitute a body, whatever the think tank is going to compromise. But first, I'm saying then can they put in, let's say, 1 lakh crores? Can they fund 1 lakh crores for creating a cyber security capability here, which talks about a lot of things at a national level, security for the business.
Sorry, Suresh, I know you sort of came in and out. I would just say it is a spend over a period of time. Day one, you do not need 1 lakh crore. First, you need to establish the framework, the guardrails, the process, and some initial funding to identify the right people, identify the initial aspects, and then ramp it up over a period of time. You do not need all of these investments day one. So the government obviously we all operate on limited financial resources, and the government is no exception. So let's start, just treat it like a business. How would you run it in an efficient manner? So this is how you would run it. Obviously here you're dealing with national security. So the same thought process applies. You run it in an efficient manner, in an effective manner, start small and start ramping up over a period of time.
So let's go back to the other point, which is important, and I would like to call in Commander Prakash over here. When we talk about effective and efficient and putting things together, funding, as you say, we may not reach 1 lakh crores in the initial stage, but we talk about tranches, but at least commit some amount over there. I'm talking about timeline. We cannot have it indefinitely running for years together, and then it is collecting grass on top of it, moss below it, and then there's no end to that. So Commander Prakash, how would you think in terms of it's a problem, and I know we sitting in this room in this webinar we cannot solve the problem, but at least some thoughts which can be collected, and then we can look forward as presenting this as one of the recommendations, if not something less also is fine. But timelines, how important they are. What kind of time do we have to come up with an excellent, globally par cybersecurity framework?
Suresh, first I would like to say that anybody who claims to have, off-the-cuff solutions to these problems is either a fraud or from a Big Four consultancy, which essentially mean the same thing. I mean, I hope I'm not being too rude here, but essentially they mean the same thing. Let us first recognize the problem. And I'm sure that if we formally recognize the problem at our strategy level, if Niti Aayog, for example, comes out and asks, saying, I recognize that I need Indian startups in cybersecurity, and therefore, it also means that it will say, this is how I will reserve space for them. Industry will come up with solutions. They will come up with funding. You first recognize the problem. If you refuse to recognize the problem, if you say there is no problem, I'm buying Cisco, how will then any Indian startup come? I'll just like to tell you, have you, any of you heard these names? Tuple-Jump, Valid Software, VALYD, or Ineda Systems. They don't even exist as websites these days. Inida was bought over by Intel. Valid was bought over by RSA. Tuple Jump was bought over by Apple. There are 3 startups from my Goldland. They are all from Hyderabad. They are all startups which were bought up and disappeared. Now I don't grudge those people. If you had guaranteed them, see, encryption and all is totally regulated stuff. If you had guaranteed them a share of the Indian strategic market, they would have definitely stuck around and tried to do something. But the problem is, as I said, to summarize, A, recognize the problem so that minds start getting applied to solutions. My own solution would be that at least put aside a strategic sector, an assurance-based sector for them to play in without fear of being gobbled up. I think you will find results.
Great, Commander Prakash. Let me just turn to Rinka, and I'll ask you the last question, Rinka, in the interest of time, and then turn it back to Bala for more questions and comments. So when we talk about something like, recognize the problem, and I'm sure as technologies, you would also know that, whether the health sector or manufacturing or the academia, recognizing this as a problem for them is not priority. Their priorities are different. Now, when you look at something at par globally, and I also understand that you have actually, as an iSpirit, you have come up with this UPI, and there is growth over there. How does the government, or rather, how should the government of India think of mobilizing some kind of a structure which helps growth of indigenous companies to the level? Not again, don't mistake me, it won't be in 1 year and 2 years, but give them a decade, maybe 5 years, 10 years, but clear goals and clear objectives. Indigenous companies, how they can grow and become as big as a Microsoft or an IBM. Is it possible, first of all, and can they do it?
So yes, let me give you a slightly longish answer, and a lot of it builds upon what Commander Prakash said. See, it cannot be a push strategy, it has to be a pull strategy. Like Commander Prakash said, see, if there is a market, we will gravitate towards that market. And if we have that, and we have that emotional affinity, and we would like to, but why we don't gravitate to markets in India? Because there is no market. The funding will come. The funding is not such a huge issue. If we really, really need the funding, that will come. So for example, there's been a lot of funding that has happened in the UPI space. Once we had defined the payment, the UPI interfaces. So that market has to be defined. And that market means that there has to be business, there has to be money, and there has to be contracts. Okay, so how does that market get defined? It boils down to strategy. What is strategically important to us? If cybersecurity is not important to us, then let's not put money into that. Let's put money someplace else. Okay, but let me put it this way. We know that in the decades ahead, cybersecurity capabilities are going to be as important as the capabilities of our current armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force. Cyberspace, if it's going to be the DNA of humanity, will be just as important, and we will need an arm that is as powerful as each of these. To my mind, that is strategy, what the long road says. One needs to start planning, thinking from that perspective, what is the long road, and then build backwards. There are 2 ways that happens today in humanity. One way is the organic way, where you stumble along, bumble along, then realize, oh God, this is important, and then start investing. The other way is to look forward and say, yes, this is going to be important, and then work backwards. And that is what both the other participants are saying here, that we need to look forwards, identify strategically how important this is, and then look backwards. Now, when we talk of funding, the funding here is, see, from a startup or any business organization perspective, the funding can be used for actually reducing the risk and the ability for an organization to lengthen its runway of survival, and therefore go out and get business. And if that business is available in India and that funding is coupled to markets in India, so much better. We have a problem. We know that. And you just have to say, yes, this problem is important. I'm willing to put so many crores behind this problem. Please solve this problem. Okay. So that is one part. See, the questions you had asked there were 2-3 perspectives to it. So I'll go into those perspectives also. See, from a historical perspective, as when TCP/IP, the internet was defined, we had no idea how important security was, because in those days when Windsurf first defined the internet, the focus was on connecting a couple of academic labs, and that's it. And we wanted to make sure that if one university was nuked, then the other universities could continue. And that was the premise. Security never figured. No one ever figured that we will take this and go commercial and it will become the DNA of humanity. As that happened, then we discovered there were a lot of issues. A lot of things were addressed, and one of the things that needed to be addressed was security. Security systems have been a bolt-on, which is why we see so many gaps. See, when you go to a bank, let's go back to the 70s when the banks was completely paper-based. Something like this never bothered the banks because there was no such thing as a cyber attack on them. I mean, how will you attack a bank ledger? You can't, right? So that security was inbuilt. So we never thought of those. Then the banks decided that, okay, it is very important to give our customers good service. So let's go on the internet. But they went on the internet, but they never considered all of this. So I'll come back to a point that Samir had made earlier, that when we look at these changes, we need to look at it from 3 perspectives, actually. We need to look at it from people perspective, that people's capability is important. Also, what the consumers need. So that's the people perspective. The second perspective is the technology perspective. What is the technology available and how do we leverage that? But there's a third perspective that we are missing out on a consistent basis. See, each of this change in how the people behaviors expectation, the technology behavior expectation causes a change in the system. For example, for the banks, we changed from a manual ledger system to an automated system. We have not thought that systems change through properly. We are not doing that properly, and that is a huge, huge gap. And that is one of the things that the government really needs to look at before.
Let me just stop you for a minute here, Rinka. That has not stopped other countries to be a lot more secure at a national level. The same problem is faced by anybody else, whether it's America or US and things like that. What I'm trying to talk about, it's 2 different subjects, right? When you talk about at a national level. But I'll let you continue for a couple of minutes before I turn it back to Bala.
Right. So when we talk of security, your example of what happens there, if you look at the systems there, the systems have changed. In our case, the systems are still changing, and they're changing reactively. They're not changing proactively. That was my point. Okay. Having said that, I think the critical part here is we first need to decide what is important to us, what is our priority, and based on that, define our strategy and start investing behind it in terms of defining markets and saying that we will open these markets out to you, business, whether it is a MSME or medium size, etc., and say, please go solve these problems for us, and we will pay you for it. You open these out. Those startups that got funded and went out to RSA, etc., will stay in India, and they will build in India, and they will grow in India. Let's not forget, India is now the 3rd largest economy in the world, and it continues to grow. We should leverage that. We just have to be a little more focused and a little more thoughtful.
Okay. Thanks, Rinka. I would like to thank all the 3 panelists, Commander Prakash, Samir, and Rinka, for your insights and your valuable points. And Bala, I turn it over back to you.
Just a second, sir. Going through the chat box for the questions.
Bala, just take a couple of questions. We are running bad. I know we started late, but then we had to close this quickly, so then we'll have to give it to
There's one question by Prakash sir. He has asked, why do we want to grow our own Microsoft? Why can't we have 100 SMEs that are competitive and indigenous and able to support our needs?
Anyone from the panel?
I'll give it a shot. I think, see, one of the issues with having a Microsoft and a Google, while that looks sexy, is that it becomes a natural monopoly, and that actually is damaging to the economy. It is much better to have a huge number of piranhas who are hunting for markets. And I would support that. But the natural inclination of any startup or business is to grow into Microsoft. Everybody wants to. But yeah, if there is systems support that we can have 1 million piranhas, I think from an economy perspective, that would be more effective. But that's my personal perspective. So,
Yeah, Bala?
Yes, sir, you can take over, sir, please.
Yeah. So the session is over, and I've thanked the participants. I think now we'll have to turn it back to Commander Vasan first, and then Mr. picking up the today's session.
Yes, sir. I request Commodore Vasan, sir, Director C3S, to take over for the valedictory session. Over to you, Vasan, sir.
Good afternoon. Hope I am audible now.
Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Oh, good. So, unfortunately, my apologies first because I was not able to join. Though I was able to hear everything, I was not able to, moderate the session, etc. So, my sincere apologies. But having been here for the last 2 days, in my assessment, I think it's one of the best webinar on cybersecurity that I have attended personally, and I'm sure many of you likewise feel so. And so many issues have been covered. I know maybe we digressed a little in trying to see how we need to build our own cybersecurity systems and how we must encourage local players, etc. But the primary focus continues to be on China, because our entire effort for the next 4 sessions, I mean all the 4 webinars, are about deciphering China. How is that they are able to succeed, in infiltrating many domains everywhere? How is that they're able to play up this game, as was brought out by Namrata, on media warfare, on information warfare, on getting into various systems, whether it's a political system or media or the military or whatever, through various systems that they have. So this was our focus, to try and understand China, see how they're doing this business, and how are we in comparison, where do we stand, where is it that we lack, and how can we improve our own lot. So from this point of view, the deliberations in the last 2 days have been phenomenal in terms of adding to our knowledge base, number one, in terms of trying to understand our adversary, and also trying to understand the global practices, and also more importantly, on how we can reimagine ourselves, in terms of building up our own robust cyber security system. But before you build cyber security systems, it's important that we build up information systems, information support systems. I think which is the point that Commander Prakash brought out in his multiple interventions. So it's important to understand what our weaknesses are, where do we stand today, and how can we help our industry to grow. From that point of view, I find that the inputs that came today from Rinka, from Samir, from Suresh were extraordinary in terms, because they have understood the system. Having been with the system for more than decades, having been there at the receiving end and at the giving end, they have understood the system so well. Today, they are the people who need to be consulted on what we need to do to make India a society that is capable of handling its huge masses who are now, in the digital economy, who are in the digital field. So, it's a huge opportunity out there for industries and for the state, whether it's the central level or the state level or the military. It is a huge challenge to be able to look at the security systems, their architecture, and shape our responses. Again, as I said earlier, another high point was the tabletop exercise. I think the amount of lessons that came out of this tabletop exercise are again something that people would carry home. They looked at, of course, the health industry and the challenges that there were, where we took too much for granted. Whether it is the access system or whether it is some other health system, unless you face these problems, you find that you take too much for granted and you think that your laptop will work, You think that your firewalls will work, and you think that everything else is there is hunky-dory. Till the situation that was faced, which was brought out so well by these Oscar nominees, Suresh Munjal and others, I think it was an outstanding performance in trying to see what kind of challenges there are in running an industry. It's not easy. It's not just, because what is it that you would like to delink? Do you want the administration separately? Do you want the patient care system separately managed by another independent server, with different protocols? There are some of the things I'm sure the industry will become very wise to, particularly when you also integrate the insurance. It's all right to showcase and say it's a cashless system. You come here and, our insurance will take charge. But these are all operated on platforms that are vulnerable. So we need to be able to address these vulnerabilities at a different level. So I would not like to take too much of time, because I know we have taken a lot of time in trying to address these core issues of where we stand today. And that we don't, it doesn't look too good to me when you look at the kind of vulnerabilities that are there. Yes, General Pant was able to come and tell us and reassure us there's a lot that's taken place after 2013 when we led these policies, but it's for something else to be made to make it work. And make it work is something that is a challenge for any government or the private industry or all other stakeholders who have a huge task ahead of them. So coming back to the focus of the webinars that we have, our focus was to try and understand China. And there are many pertinent points that have been made in terms of what we need to understand about our own vulnerabilities, how we need to understand and learn from the strength of other countries, whether it is USA or Russia or China. A country like USA is worried that Russia can interfere with the election systems. So please ensure that we carry back these lessons in a big way. And our own challenge for the three organizers is to put the summary of all these discussions together and try and reach the right kind of people, whether it is General Pant, whether it is Admiral Kale, whether it is Commander Prakash, to be able to have that we have a cohesive, workable strategy that tells us how to prepare for the challenges ahead. And so China has managed it because of the single party system, because of the way they are able to, cohesively work at different levels. And, therefore, it's one system that's looking at the world and taking on the challenges. So to grow to that level in a democracy is a different kettle of fish. So I would like to compliment, ourselves, that's all the three organizers, and also thank all the extraordinary speakers who came to us on our request. Whether it is Namrata, whether it is General Pant, whether it is Rinka, whether it is, from Hindu, Panir Selvam, or others. I think each of them have brought to the table some wonderful experiences. And they have told us, they've shown the light on what needs to be worked in terms of taking on China. We can't take it on overnight. We need to build those resources and capabilities. And I must also thank Rajaram, who has been continuously feeding this information in the chat box on how he looks at this issue. And I'm sure he can be brought on board to make a summary and also to try and send our prescriptions to the government of India and all other stakeholders. And that's where we would have done our job. And not by conducting just a very successful conference here or a webinar on this wonderful platform by getting the right kind of people, but more in terms of looking at the lessons, the summaries, and charting the cures for the future that will ensure that the vulnerabilities are minimized. No nation today, the moment you are on a common platform, we call it the global commons in the maritime domain, but it's the same terminology that was used here, the cyber domain, which is common to everybody, accessible to everybody, and therefore vulnerable in many areas. So this is where I must thank everyone here for this, some wonderful lessons that we carried in the last 2 days. And special thanks to Suresh and his team, who have helped us out in ensuring that it was at a very high pitch, the highest standards were maintained, and something extraordinary was done in terms of conducting a very successful tabletop exercise, which I am sure will be copied worldwide in terms of saying how we need to get the experts together to bring these lessons through a scenario building or a tabletop exercise or whatever you want to call it, a computer assembly-related game. Thank you, and thanks for this opportunity for the three organizations to come together and to look at this. It's again China specific. I would like to remind myself and others that it is China specific. So whether we are looking at the maritime webinar, which is next, or the media thereafter, would like to continue to concentrate on what we can do to understand China better, and therefore how we can shape our responses so that we are not vulnerable anymore. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. Just Shri Pratap Pavlikar, sir, to present the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
I think thank Bala. I think before we finally bring down the curtains on this aspect of the webinar, firstly, I would like to thank Commodore Vasan and Shashi Nair for having very readily agreed to share the platform on a subject of national interest, a subject which cuts across all silos, brings everybody here. And I think given that we were on the same platform, we had some extraordinary support from our colleagues, including Suresh, Samir, and Kunjal. And I think we were able to put up an extraordinary show. I say this because I have 3 emails from people in Delhi who have appreciated what happened yesterday. And they said that we were frank, we were to the point, and we were not holding back things that needed to be said. I think that was a great remark, and the tribute was paid to the tabletop exercise, and somebody said that you should have an IPR on it. As I move on, I would like also to thank most all the speakers who came at my request, at the request of this co-host, and I think we brought some quality to the table. And we wish that we had more people who would be on the participant side, but we had 220 odd registrations and about 80 odd people who attended. I think that was a great sign that people are interested in China. The intention was not to glorify China beyond a point, or not to understate that what we are doing. I think we need to understand both sides of the coin. Having said all this, I would like to thank all our participants who sat through, and I'm sure that at the end of the day, we would have a document that will, tell the authority that this is what we feel, and these are some of the suggestions that we could make. And I think some of the suggestions that we are going to make would perhaps have been in the National Cybersecurity Policy, but that still does not subtract from our effort. One of the most important things is that we had a totally Indian look at the problem of China. We didn't have any outsiders who was going to talk to us either from any other country, but we had brought to the table the hard realities of what we need to understand. The fact that the webinar was planned in the backdrop of the border, the troubles at the Indo-Tibet border in Ladakh, was just to flag that yes, India is alive, India understands what are the pitfalls, what are the dangers, and India has its domestic approaches to resolving some issues. So with that, I think I would like to formally thank everybody who's now here and people who have left after listening to us. Thank you very much. God bless, and we hope that we will see you all at the third on the China and Maritime. Thank you very much.